The desert sun was a heavy, white coin in the sky, pressing down on the empty stretch of highway. The heat made the air above the blacktop shimmer like a wavy dream. Out here, the world was quiet except for the sigh of the wind and the hum of tires from the rare passing car down an old Ford F-150. Its dark blue paint faded and dusty from the road, turned off the highway. It rolled slowly up to the worn-out gas pumps of a lonely station. The place was just a small box of a building with a sign that had lost some of its letters. It looked like it was built just to give travelers a break from the huge, empty landscape around it. The truck's engine clicked and settled into silence. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't young, but it was hard to guess his age. His face was tanned and lined, not from worry, but from a lifetime spent looking at horizons under open skies. His hair was cut short, almost to the scalp, practical and neat. He wore simple jeans and a plain t-shirt that stretched across a chest and shoulders that were still thick and strong, like a tree trunk. He moved without hurry, each action smooth and with a purpose, as if he never wasted a single motion. This was Ben. He reached for the gas pump, his hands rough and marked with old scars that told silent stories. He didn't look around much. He had already seen everything he needed to see when he pulled in. His eyes, a pale, cool blue, didn't miss a detail. The worn pump, the dusty windows of the shop, the empty road stretching in both directions. It was a habit, this quiet watchfulness. It was just part of who he was now. From the passenger seat of the truck, another set of eyes was watching. Rex, a German shepherd with a coat of dark gold and black, sat perfectly still. He was a big dog, all solid muscle, and a broad, intelligent head. He wasn't panting or restless. He just watched Ben, his ears perked forward, taking in the same scene. A special harness rested against his fur. He wasn't a pet out for a fun ride. He was a partner, resting between missions, even if those missions nowadays were just walks and keeping an old soldier company. Ben slid the nozzle into the truck's tank, and the pump began to click and whir. He turned and gave a low, soft sound, not quite a word. At the sound, Rex's posture shifted. He stood up in his seat, turned in a careful circle, and lay back down, now facing the outside world, his chin on his paws. He was off duty, but he was still on watch. His calm, deep brown eyes scanned the parking lot, then the road, then the building. There was no fear or excitement in his gaze, just a patient, steady attention. The man and the dog existed together in a bubble of quiet understanding. They didn't need to speak. Years of trust and shared experience had built a language of looks and small gestures. Ben leaned against the side of his truck, feeling the sun's heat on his skin. He took a slow breath of the dry desert air. These moments of stillness were precious to him. After years of noise, pressure, and chaos, this silence was like cool water. It was a chance to just be, to remember the good parts of service, the brotherhood, the purpose, and let the harder memories settle into the past, where they belonged. He looked over at Rex. The dog's ears twitched, catching a sound Ben couldn't hear yet. It was probably just a tumbleweed or a distant bird. Ben gave a small, almost invisible nod, and Rex relaxed his ears again, his gaze softening. They had been through everything together. Rex had been more than a tool. He had been a guardian, a scout, a friend who could sense stress before Ben even felt it himself. Now, in this retirement, they were both learning a new, slower pace of life. This drive, this stop for gas, was part of their new routine. The gas pump clicked off, full. Ben hung up the nozzle and screwed the cap back on his tank. He decided to go inside to pay with cash and maybe get a cold bottle of water for the road. He looked at Rex, pointed a finger at him, and said in a firm, quiet voice, "Hold." The dog's attention snapped to Ben. He didn't whine or scratch at the window. He simply sat up straighter, accepting the command. He would guard the truck. He would wait. Ben walked toward the small shop, his boots making a soft crunch on the gravel. He was a man who carried his history inside him, not on his sleeve. To anyone passing by, he might just look like a quiet, capable man, maybe a rancher or a carpenter. There was nothing to show the incredible strength, skill, and sacrifice of his past life. And that was how he preferred it. His worth wasn't in a title or a story he told strangers. It was in the peace he had earned, the friend waiting in his truck, and the straight line he tried to walk in the world. He pushed the door to the shop open, a little bell jingling above him. Inside, it was dark and cool. For Ben and Rex, outside in the truck, it was just another peaceful stop on a long, quiet journey. They had no idea that this peace was about to be shattered by a storm of noise, arrogance, and foolishness rolling in on 4 expensive wheels. Their simple stop for gas was going to become a lesson, and the teachers were about to arrive. Asterisk. The quiet of the desert was a fragile thing. It was broken in an instant. A roar like angry metal beasts erupted from the highway. It wasn't the steady hum of a semi-truck or the rattle of an old car. This was a sharp, screaming, high-pitched wail of engines pushed hard and fast. The sound hurt the ears. It grew from a distant buzz to a deafening shriek in just a few heartbeats. 2 cars shot past the gas station like bullets, a blur of bright, shiny colors. Then the sound changed. The scream of the engines dropped to a harsh, gurgling growl as brakes slammed on. The cars, a blinding lime green one and another wrapped in mirror-like chrome, spun sharply into the station's lot. Their tires screeched and cried against the hot asphalt, throwing up little clouds of burnt rubber dust that hung in the hot air. They didn't park neatly. They skidded to a stop, one on each side of Ben's blue truck, boxing it in completely. The sudden silence after the noise felt even louder. Then, the doors of the fancy cars opened upwards, like wings. 2 young men stepped out. They were probably brothers. They had the same styled hair, the same look of bored confidence on their smooth, tanned faces. Their clothes were expensive, tight-fitting, and spotless, not meant for a dusty desert stop. Their sunglasses were dark and sleek, hiding their eyes. The taller one, who had been driving the green car, stretched his arms and looked around as if he owned the empty desert. His eyes landed on Ben's old Ford, then on Ben himself, who was just walking back out of the shop door, a cold bottle of water in his hand. "Check this out," the taller brother said, his voice loud and aiming to be heard. He nudged the other brother with his elbow. "Looks like someone's grandpa got lost on his way to the farm." The other brother laughed, a short, barking sound. He pulled out his phone and started pointing it around, filming the scene. "Yeah, this is perfect. Real authentic desert vibe." He swung the phone toward Ben. "Hey, old-timer, you need help finding your way home? That truck belong in a museum?" Ben stopped walking. He stood very still near the hood of his truck. He placed his bottle of water gently on the ground. He didn't say a word. His face didn't show anger or fear. It was like a calm, still lake. But his eyes, those pale blue eyes, shifted. They took in the 2 young men, their cars, their positions. It was a fast, automatic calculation. Inside the truck, Rex had not moved from his sitting position. But everything about him had changed. His ears were pitched so far forward, they were flat against his skull. His head was lowered slightly, his neck muscles tight and corded. His eyes were locked on the 2 strangers, following their every jerk and movement. A low vibration, so deep it was almost more of a feeling than a sound, hummed in his chest. It was not a growl. Not yet. It was a warning rumble, the sound of a spring being coiled tight, The taller brother, encouraged by Ben's silence, swaggered forward. He was trying to impress his brother and the phone camera. He walked right up to the gas pump Ben had just used, which was between him and Ben's driver's side door. "We're in a major hurry," the tall brother said, talking slowly as if to someone who didn't understand. "We've got a bet going on who's faster to Vegas, so you're going to need to move this rusty piece of junk. Now." He gestured dismissively at Ben's truck. Ben finally spoke. His voice was flat. It had no emotion in it at all. It was quiet, but it cut through the hot air like a piece of cold steel. "The pump's free. I'm finished." The brother with the phone laughed again. "He's finished. You hear that? He's finished." He zoomed the phone in on Ben's face, looking for a reaction. "Just move the truck, dude. Our time is, actually valuable." The taller one stepped closer, now directly in Ben's path if Ben wanted to get to his driver's door. He crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. He was bigger than Ben, taller, younger. He clearly thought he had all the power here. Ben didn't look at the brother's face. He looked past him, through the windshield of his truck. His eyes met Rex's for a fraction of a second. The dog's intense, focused stare was like a dark anchor in the swirling foolishness of the moment. Ben looked back at the tall young man. "You'll get your turn," Ben said, the same flat tone. "Move aside." The brother's smirk faltered. This wasn't going the way it did in his head. The old man wasn't scared, wasn't apologetic. He was just solid. The brother's pride, filmed for an audience of one, couldn't back down. "Or what?" he said, puffing out his chest. "What are you going to do, old man?" That's when Ben did something very small. He didn't raise a fist. He didn't shout. He simply took a deep, slow breath through his nose and let it out through his mouth. And as he did, he made a sound. It wasn't a whistle you could hear across a field. It was a soft, precise stream of air, a specific signal shaped by his tongue and teeth. Inside the truck, Rex moved. He didn't explode into barking. He didn't scratch at the glass. In one fluid, powerful motion, he rose from his seat. He placed his two large front paws up on the center console of the truck, bringing his head and massive shoulders up high. Now he was fully visible through the windshield and the side windows. His head was level with the tall brother's chest just outside. Rex was utterly silent. His lips were not curled back in a snarl. He simply stared. He stared directly at the tall brother with an intensity that was animal and intelligent and utterly terrifying. His eyes were dark pools of absolute focus. Every muscle in his body was hard like stone, ready to unleash a power that was trained and deadly. He didn't look like a pet. He looked like a weapon that had just been unsheathed and pointed. The tall brother's head turned. He saw the dog. The smirk vanished from his face, wiped clean away. His eyes, behind the fancy sunglasses, went wide. He took an involuntary step back, his heel scraping on the gravel. The raw, physical threat was real and immediate, and it was a language he suddenly understood very well. The brother with the phone saw it too. The video frame shook. "Whoa," he whispered, the mocking tone gone from his voice. The scene wasn't funny anymore. It had just become very, very real. The silent man and his silent, terrifying dog were not afraid of them. Not at all. The bubble of their arrogant world had just popped against something unbreakable. The desert quiet rushed back in, but now it was filled with a terrible, waiting tension. The air in the gas station lot felt thick and heavy, like the moment before a lightning strike. The only sound was the faint, tense hum of the expensive car's engines, still running. The tall brother stood frozen, his body halfway between a swagger and a retreat. He was close enough to the truck window to see the individual hairs standing up along the ridge of the dog's back. He could see the dark, wet nose, and the unblinking eyes that held no anger, only a pure, chilling promise. I will act if I need to. The brother's own reflection stared back at him from the dog's pupils, tiny and scared. All his confidence, his belief that his money and his car made him powerful, drained away into the hot dust at his feet. This was a different kind of power. It was quiet, patient, and it didn't care about his designer sunglasses. His friend with the phone slowly lowered the device. The screen went dark. The joke was over. The video he thought would be so funny to show people later now felt dangerous, like evidence of his own foolishness. He took a small, shuffling step back toward his own car door. The tall brother finally found his voice, but it wasn't the loud, mocking one from before. It came out tight and higher, trying to sound tough but cracking at the edges. Call off your dog, man. That's not cool. Ben didn't even glance at Rex. He kept his pale eyes on the young man's face. He knew Rex wasn't doing anything but holding his position. The dog was waiting for a command, not acting on his own. Ben's calm was absolute. It was the calm of a man who had stood in much scarier places in a gas station parking lot. He's just sitting there, Ben said, his voice still that same, even tone. You're the one standing in my way. You move. It was a simple statement of fact. The problem wasn't the dog. The problem was the young man's choice to block the path. The logic of it was so plain, it made the brother's chest feel hollow. His mind scrambled for a way out that didn't look like he was running away. His pride was a wounded, flapping thing. Whatever, he spat out, the word meant to sound dismissive, but coming out weak. Just forget it. This dump isn't worth it anyway. He threw his hands up in a gesture of fake frustration, trying to make it seem like he was choosing to leave, not being forced to. He took 2 quick steps back, putting more space between himself and the truck window, where Rex hadn't moved a single muscle. The dog's head just turned slightly, tracking him like a satellite tracking a signal. The tall brother turned and almost jogged back to his lime green car. He yanked the door open and fell into the seat. His friend was already in his chrome car, fumbling to start the engine. The earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery, nervous energy. They had come in like kings, and now they just wanted to escape. The tall brother revved his engine, a loud, roaring sound that was meant to sound powerful, but now just sounded desperate. He threw his car into reverse, jerking back away from Ben's truck. Gravel spit from his tires. He then slammed it into drive. As he turned his wheel to speed back toward the highway, his eyes darted one last time to the old blue Ford. Ben was moving now. Not quickly, but with purpose. He walked the few steps to his driver's side door, completely ignoring the shrieking cars. He opened the door. Only then did he look at Rex and give a small, single nod. Like a switch had been flipped, the dog relaxed. The terrible, coiled spring tension left his body. He lowered himself from the console, settled back into the passenger seat, and sat normally. He let out a big huff of air, his tongue lolling out for a second. The job was done. The threat in his mind was driving away, and got in and closed his door. The inside of the truck was quiet, a familiar sanctuary. He didn't start the engine right away. He reached over and put a big, rough hand on Rex's head, right between his ears. He scratched there firmly. "Good boy," he said, his voice dropping into a softer, warmer tone that only the dog ever heard. "Steady boy. Just some noisy pups." Rex leaned into the touch, his tail giving 2 slow, heavy thumps against the seat. Outside, the 2 supercars had reached the highway's edge. They didn't stop or look for traffic. They shot out onto the blacktop, their engines screaming again as they pushed the pedals to the floor. They were trying to outrun the feeling that had just crawled up their spines. They were trying to reclaim their lost swagger with speed, to blow away the embarrassment with wind and noise. In seconds, they were just two shrinking, shiny specks in the rearview mirror, trailing clouds of dust and shame. Ben watched them go, his face unreadable. He felt no victory. There was no smile on his face. What he felt was a faint, familiar tiredness. A tiredness for people who thought being loud and shiny was the same as being strong. He had seen real strength, and it often looked like the silent man next to you in the dark, or a loyal friend who asked for nothing but your trust. He finally started his truck. The engine turned over with a dependable rumble. He pulled forward slowly, away from the pumps, and drove up to the edge of the highway. He came to a full, complete stop. He looked left, then right, then left again. The desert road was clear as he pulled out and turned onto the highway, heading in the same direction as the young men, but at a normal, safe speed. He saw something up ahead in the distance. Flashing red and blue lights, tiny but bright against the tan landscape. 2 state trooper cars were parked on the wide shoulder, and pulled over in front of them were the 2 shiny, expensive cars. Ben drove on. He didn't slow down to look. He didn't need to. As he passed the scene, he saw the 2 brothers standing outside their cars. They weren't smirking or filming anything. They were just standing there with their hands on their heads, watching the troopers write tickets. Their heads were bowed. Their expensive cars, their symbols of power, were now just evidence of a stupid, costly mistake. Ben looked back at the road ahead. A quiet, dry smile finally touched the corners of his mouth for just a second. It wasn't a smile of gloating. It was the smile of a man who understood the universe sometimes had a very direct, very simple way of teaching lessons. The loudest bark often came from the smallest dog, and the fastest car couldn't outrun a stupid decision. He reached down and gave Rex's ear one more rub. "All quiet now, buddy," he said. The desert stretched out before them, vast and peaceful once more. The interruption was over. Their quiet journey home could continue. The long, straight highway was a gray ribbon cutting through the endless brown. Ben kept his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, his eyes watching the road with a steady, practiced focus. The little drama at the gas station was already fading in his mind, like a small, annoying cloud that had blown past. He didn't dwell on things he couldn't control, and the attitudes of spoiled young men were far, far down on his list of concerns. In the seat beside him, Rex had settled fully. The dog's head was resting on his paws, his eyes half closed, watching the scrubland blur past. The deep, steady rumble of the truck's engine was a familiar lullaby. The tension from before was completely gone from his body. For Rex, the world was simple. A threat had appeared. He had been given a signal. He had taken his position. The threat had left. Therefore, the job was done. Now, it was time to rest until the next job came. He trusted the man driving completely. Ben's thoughts drifted, as they often did on these long drives, to the past. Not to the bad moments, but to the quiet ones in between. He remembered a different kind of heat, more wet and heavy, and the feeling of Rex's solid shoulder pressed against his leg in the dark, both of them listening to a night full of strange sounds. He remembered the absolute certainty that the dog would let him know if anything moved out there. That trust had saved him more than once. It was a bond built not on words, but on actions, on keeping each other safe. That bond was what he felt now. It was a quiet companionship that filled the cab of the truck. He didn't need to talk to Rex to communicate. A slight shift in his posture, a change in his breathing, the dog understood it all. What they had just experienced together was just another example of that silent language. A look, a signal, and an understanding. Up ahead, the flashing lights grew clearer. The 2 state trooper cars were parked at professional angles. their light bars painting the desert brush in swirling pulses of red and blue. The lime green and chrome cars were pulled over neatly, looking much less impressive now, like fancy toys that had been caught misbehaving. Ben eased his foot off the gas just a touch, not to gawk, but because it was the safe, lawful thing to do when passing emergency vehicles. As the scene came alongside, the details became sharp and clear. The two brothers were no longer in their cars. They were standing side by side on the gravel shoulder, away from the road. Their postures were completely different from before. The tall one's shoulders were slumped, his hands clasped on top of his head. The other one had his arms crossed tightly over his chest, but it wasn't a pose of confidence. It looked like he was trying to hold himself together. Their expensive sunglasses were probably in their cars now. Their faces, even from a passing glance, looked young, flushed, and deeply unhappy. One state trooper, a man with a broad-brimmed hat and a calm, no-nonsense walk, was standing with the taller brother, a small notebook in his hand. The other trooper was back at his patrol car, likely already running their information. The scene was orderly and serious. This wasn't a warning. This was the real, official consequence of a very bad decision. Ben's truck moved past the scene at a steady, legal speed. He did not turn his head to stare. His eyes flicked to his rearview mirror for just a second, a driving habit, and he saw the tall brother briefly look up. Their eyes did not meet across the distance. The young man's gaze was aimed at the ground, at the trooper's boots, anywhere but at the passing traffic. There was a shame in his posture that all the money in the world couldn't erase. And then Ben looked forward, back to the open road. The flashing lights faded in his rearview mirror, getting smaller and smaller until they were just tiny, colorful dots. And then they were swallowed by the haze of heat and distance. He felt a deep sense of calm. It wasn't about winning or losing. He hadn't won anything at the gas station. He had just stood his ground. What he felt now was the satisfaction of seeing a natural balance restored. The universe, in its own way, had a system. You acted with arrogance and disrespect. You created a little storm of bad energy around you. That storm often came back around. Today, it had come back around in the form of 2 highway patrolmen and a very expensive ticket. Maybe even a reckless driving charge. The lesson would be written on paper and paid for with their father's credit card. But hopefully, a little of it would sink in deeper. He thought about the brothers for a moment longer. He hoped, sincerely, that the shaking in their hands right now was for more than just fear of a fine. He hoped it was from the understanding that their behavior had been wrong. That trying to make someone small to make yourself feel big was a poisonous way to live. Maybe this moment on the side of the road, humbled and quiet, would be the start of something better for them. Probably not. But maybe the incident was truly over now. The remaining drive was peaceful. The desert unrolled before them, majestic and timeless. The sky was a huge bowl of perfect blue. An eagle circled high on a thermal wind, riding the currents with effortless grace. Ben rolled his window down a little farther, letting the clean, dry air fill the cab. Rex lifted his nose, sniffing at the new scent sagebrush, dust. The distant promise of rain. Ben reached for the radio and turned it on, finding a station playing old country songs. Just a guitar and a worn-out voice telling a story about hard times and lessons learned. He hummed along softly, his fingers tapping on the wheel. He was going home. To a small, quiet house with a big yard where Rex could run. To a life he had fought for, a peace he had earned. The road was long, but he was in no hurry. He had everything he needed right here in this truck. His freedom, his memories, and his best friend riding shotgun. The rest was just scenery passing by. The house wasn't much to look at. A simple, square box made of faded wood and brick, set back from a quiet county road. A long gravel driveway led up to it, lined by a few tough, dusty trees that provided thin patches of shade. To anyone else, it might have seemed lonely, a little forgotten out on the edge of the vast emptiness. But for the man in the blue truck, it was the whole world. He turned off the main road, the tires crunching a welcome song on the gravel. Rex, who had been sleeping deeply, immediately stirred. His head came up, his ears perked, and his tail began to swing in a slow, heavy wag that thumped against the seat. He knew this sound. He knew this smell. Home. Ben felt his own shoulders relax. A tension he hadn't even known he was carrying finally letting go. The drive was over. The strange moment at the gas station and the flashing lights on the highway were now just stories that hadn't even been told yet, already fading into the background of a normal day. He pulled the truck to a stop next to a small workshop and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deep and complete, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the call of a meadowlark from a fence post. He sat for a moment, just listening to the quiet. It was a good quiet. "All right, buddy," he said, his voice a soft rumble in the still cab. "Let's go." He opened his door and stepped out, stretching his back with a low groan. The desert evening air was cooler now, carrying the scent of dry earth and sage. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Rex. The dog didn't jump out wildly. He stepped down carefully, gave himself a full-body shake that started at his nose and ended with the tip of his tail, then looked up at Ben as if to say, "What's next?" Ben reached into the back of the truck and pulled out a canvas bag of groceries he'd picked up before the gas station. He slung it over his shoulder. Together, man and dog walked across the hard-packed yard toward the house. Their steps were in no hurry. The back porch was weathered wood, with a single sturdy chair on it. Ben unlocked the door and pushed it open, and Rex trotted in first, his nails clicking on the tile floor inside. Ben followed, dropping the bag on the kitchen counter. The house was clean, simple, and orderly. A few framed photos on the wall showed groups of serious-looking young men in uniform, their arms around each other. In one, a much younger Ben knelt beside a much younger Rex, both of them in gear, dust on their faces, but with the same look of mutual trust in their eyes. Ben's routine was as steady as his breathing. He put the groceries away: coffee, eggs, bread, a few steaks. He filled a big stainless steel bowl with fresh, cold water and set it on the floor by the back door. Rex drank deeply, his lapping tongue loud in the quiet kitchen. Then the dog walked to a rug in the corner of the living room, turned in 3 precise circles, and lay down with a contented sigh, his watchful eyes following Ben's movements. Ben went back outside. He stood on the porch for a while, just looking at his land. The sky was turning colors now, soft oranges and pinks bleeding into the blue over the distant mountains. This was the time of day he loved most. The peace wasn't just outside. It was inside him. He thought about the boys in the expensive cars. The memory came back without any sting. He wondered, briefly, if they were still on the side of the road, or if they were driving slowly and carefully toward Vegas now, the fun drained out of their trip. He wondered if they were talking about what happened, or if they were too embarrassed to even mention it. He hoped, in a way, that they were talking about it, that maybe one of them would say, "That was stupid of us," and the other would just nod. That was the real karma, he thought. Not the ticket or the shame, but the moment you have to look at yourself and not like what you see. The moment you have a chance to change. He'd had moments like that in his own life, long ago. Everyone did, if they were paying attention. A soft whine came from inside. Rex was at the door, his head tilted. Ben smiled. All right, dinner time." He went back in and prepared their meals. For Rex, a measured cup of kibble with a little warm broth poured over it. For himself, he fried 2 eggs in a cast iron skillet. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the scrape of a fork and the crunch of dog food. After dinner, as the last light faded, Ben took a cold bottle of beer and went back to the porch chair. Rex came out and settled at his feet, leaning his heavy weight against the man's legs. Ben took a slow sip, his hand resting on the dog's broad head. The stars began to appear, one by one, then in countless thousands, brighter out here than anywhere else. The immense silence of the desert night settled around them, a silence that was full of life if he knew how to listen. The rustle of a night creature, the whisper of the wind. This was the victory. Not the confrontation, but this quiet, this safety, this unquestioning companionship. He had stood his ground today, not to prove a point, but to protect the simple, hard-won peace. To show that his peace, his dignity, and the dignity of his friend were not things to be traded for someone else's amusement. Rex let out a long, sleepy huff. Ben looked down at him, silhouetted in the starlight. "You did good today," he whispered. The dog's tail thumped once on the wooden porch. He stayed out there until the beer was finished and the night grew cool. Then he stood, his bones creaking a little. "Come on, old friend. Let's turn in." They went inside. Ben locked the door, a simple habit. He turned off the lights and made his way to the bedroom. Rex followed, curling up on his own worn bed in the corner. The man climbed into his own bed, the sheets cool and clean. In the darkness, he listened to the sound of the dog's steady breathing. It was the most comforting sound he knew. The day was done. Its small lesson was etched somewhere, maybe in the desert air, maybe in the memory of 2 young men, maybe just in the quiet satisfaction in his own heart. He closed his eyes. Out on the highway, cars would be passing the gas station under the same stars. Life went on. But here, in this small house on the edge of everything, all was as it should be. The protector was home. The mission, for today, was complete. And that was everything.